This is Nate McGaha, Executive Director of Arts North Carolina. And this video is going to walk us through Arts North Carolina's 2024 legislative request, specifically to be used for Arts Day 24, May 21st and 22nd in Raleigh, North Carolina. First, we hope that everybody will use the advocacy mobile site. Go ahead and go to that web address and make sure you bookmark it onto your homepage so that it'll work just like an app. It's got everything you need to know, your advocacy toolkit, as well as scheduling and speaker bios for the conference, and of course, maps and information about the Arts Caucus and everything that you need for Legislative Day. It really is a one-stop shop. It's easy to navigate, so please make sure you utilize this resource. There's a lot of other resources you can find through there, and some of it on our website at artsnc.org. The legislative request, which we're going to be talking about today, as well as fact sheets about the nonprofit arts in North Carolina, or Americans for the Arts, Why the Arts Matter in North Carolina fact sheets, and lots of other arts and arts education resources. Also, lots of training videos like this one, as well as videos about how to have meetings and how to schedule meetings, how to lead meetings, and Advocacy 101, which talks more in detail about advocacy, but also about Arts North Carolina and the work that we do. Now, this document lists all of our legislative requests for this session. You can see we're asking for number one, $1 million recurring increase. Recurring means it just happens every year from here on out for the North Carolina Arts Council General Grants Program, which hasn't seen an increase in over 15 years. And right now, current funding is only meeting 41% of those grants potential. We're also asking for a requirement to make sure that all elementary school students K through 5 get both performing and visual arts. Right now, 1 out of every 20 kids do not have both music and visual art in their elementary school. And we want to make sure they get a standards-based education in these topics. Also, request number 3 is to make the current funding for A-plus schools of North Carolina recurring. That funding right now is $750,000 per year, but it is non-recurring in this year's budget. So we want them to make it recurring to help support this great program. Now, this document has our legislative asks and lots of data to kind of help you put it into context. Make sure you're getting this via email out to legislators before your meeting, as well as a follow-up after your meeting. And then, of course, we'll have printed copies for you to take to your legislative meetings on May 22nd. Now, this document does have the data, but remember that your stories are what really provide the humanity of arts advocacy and that heart and soul. Also, keep in mind that legislators and really all funders are usually more interested in art that does good for the community than they are whether or not the art is good. So really focus on the impact of the art that you do. Now, of course, we had our arts and economic prosperity results come out this year, and we want to utilize those, talking about the $2.23 billion economic activity between spending by nonprofit arts over $1 billion, event-related spending above the cost of admission, $1.18 billion, $439 million in taxes for local, state, and federal, and 38,000 full-time jobs supported. And you can see down at the bottom there, we've got sort of a breakdown so you can get those really hard numbers and a breakdown of where those tax dollars are going. Also, we want to talk about how visitors attract, or how arts attract visitors and their spending. You can see there we break down how the average North Carolina attendee spends $39.10 for the cost of admission, and we break down, we're over the cost of admission. We want to break down how that gets spending so we can show that research and how it's being done. And also looking at the fact that those from inside the county, those local attendees are spending a little over $34 over and above the cost of admission, but those non-local attendees from outside the county, over $61, and the 7% that are coming from out of state, $96.45. And it's important to underline that 1 out of every 3 patrons to these events are coming from another area. 1 out of 3, that's 1/3, are not from the area that's hosting the event. And those patrons, 2/3 of them said that the event was the main reason that they were visiting the area, and almost 2/3 of them said that they would have just gone to a different community for a similar event. So really important that we support those arts and culture events. Now, for that first ask, that $1 million for general grants, again, we want to spotlight that it's been over 15 years and that the current funding is only covering about 41% of what people are eligible for based on their requests. We need to get to $1 million, and that would get us up to $1 per capita. Right now, we're at 9.8 million. That would get us 10.8 million, which is about the population of North Carolina. Right now, when you calculate all the other investments in the North Carolina Arts Council, such as staff, we come out to $1.13. And you can see that is well below the regional average and certainly well below states like Mississippi, South Carolina, Florida, and Alabama. And it's really important that we show that North Carolina really needs to step up its investment in order to be competitive in the Southeast region. Also, we want to educate legislators about general grants and what those really are, particularly the new sustaining support grants, which are open to all eligible North Carolina arts organizations. Now, before the pandemic, that unrestricted operating funding was really only granted out to certain organizations with a relationship with the Arts Council that were invited for that type of funding. This new program is open to any organization in North Carolina with a budget of over 75,000 and at least one half-time employee. But even if an organization is smaller than that, they can always apply for project support grants, which are for smaller organizations and fund specific projects, or organizations that aren't arts organizations, but that may provide some kind of arts programming, and they'll help fund that project. Also, back after a pause because of the pandemic is the military and veteran healing arts grants that fund projects that serve North Carolina's military servicemen and women, as well as veterans and their families as well. There's also a whole host of education grants that are funded through the general grants process, artist residency and performances in public schools across the state, as well as the traditional arts program that helps keep North Carolina heritage alive. And then finally, there's support grants for technical assistance, accessibility efforts and training, artist support grants, and grants that help fund those organizations that help serve the arts community statewide. And you can see here in this chart that green dotted line shows what that dollar per capita looks like. And we can see we have seen some significant increases in funding over the last several years, but we're still shy of that number that we need. And it's important to point out that the North Carolina Arts Council has really grown in who they're supporting over the last few years. 62% more direct grants through the North Carolina Arts Council in FY23 than it was before COVID. Not to mention that 39% of those new folks, or 39% of that increase, was to grantees that had never received funding from the North Carolina Arts Council. Also, it's good to point out that the North Carolina Arts Council provides industry leadership and support across all 100 counties of North Carolina in both urban and rural communities, and has been doing so for over 50 years, really providing what the arts in North Carolina needs. Now, our second request is that legislation be passed to provide K-5 students with both performing and visual arts. And we talk a lot about music and visual art, really, when we're talking about elementary school, but performing and visual arts is how we want to couch that, because it could be something other than music. And we really want local education agencies or school boards to be directed by the General Assembly to provide both of those topics for students with instruction by a teacher that is certified in their field for no less than 30 minutes every 5 instructional days, and to a standard size classroom. And so we want a certified teacher in a standardized classroom, getting access to those kids and giving them art and music each 30 minutes, at least 30 minutes every 5 days. As we said before, 1 out of every 20 K-5 students isn't enrolled in both music and visual arts because it's not available to them. And so we really want to help. There's actually one county that doesn't provide music or visual arts to either one to their students anywhere in the county. And we know that these types of classes have been shown to develop social and emotional skills and improve behavior, and also really get kids to want to be in school. Plus, creativity is considered one of the most important skills by 72% of employers. And the other thing we might want to mention is that back in 2018, the General Assembly provided about $250 million in funding for what they called program enhancement teachers. We don't love the name, but that does include dance teachers, music teachers, theater teachers, visual art, PE teachers, etc., specifically for K-5 students. That's one teacher for every 191 students. And what we really want to do is make sure that those local education agencies are living up to what the General Assembly, because unfortunately, there's a caveat that they don't have to spend the money on that. And we want to make sure that it's required, that every student have that, so that that investment by the General Assembly can be put to good work. And lastly, we want to make the current funding recurring for A-plus schools of North Carolina. Currently, there's a non-recurring allocation of $750,000. You'll notice that we did not put this on the leave behind because we didn't want to make it look like a spend. Right now, there's not a lot of spending expected in this budget process, so this is a way that they can help meet the needs of A-plus schools of North Carolina, but they don't have to spend any additional dollars in this budget. Plus, it will actually help to satisfy a matching grant in the third year when we look at next year, if those funds are made recurring. And if you don't know, A-plus schools is a whole school arts integration reform model. It is run through the North Carolina Arts Council, increases overall school performance and student grade level proficiency. So these programs are working. Preliminary findings from a new study show that A-plus schools have better teacher retention, and that traditionally marginalized students show the largest and the quickest achievement gains. So really helping those students that need the most help. Plus, this is a nationally and internationally recognized program that has schools all over the world now. And it was founded right here in North Carolina in 1995 in Winston-Salem. So this is really an investment that the General Assembly can be proud of. And it always helps to point out that those low-income students involved in the arts throughout 4 years of high school are 5 times less likely to drop out of high school and twice as likely to obtain a college degree. So the arts are making a difference. Again, I encourage everyone to make sure that they are bookmarking the advocacy mobile site. It really does have everything that you're going to need for advocacy throughout the year, but most specifically for Arts Day, both the conference day and the legislative day. Thank you all so much for watching this video about our Arts North Carolina's 2024 legislative requests, and good luck having those meetings and conversations with your legislators. And thank you for your leadership and advocacy.